But it looks like things are about to start. You ready to go in?
I'm ready.
Let's go. What was your favorite thing about what you experienced at conference? I know what mine was. I think it's going to be the same as yours.
Really?
Yes. And I was absolutely crying a little bit.
Tell me about that.
Hello, Saints. My name is Jeff. I am a pastor in Utah, exploring everything I can about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I'm joined in this video by my amazing, wonderful, beautiful, awesome wife, Joy.
Hello.
Twice a year, Latter-day Saints gather to hear teachings and talks from their church leadership. And I've gone one time. It's called General Conference. But you...
I've never been.
She's never gone. So we're going to go with a couple of Latter-day Saint friends, and we're going to experience the whole thing and give you our reaction. You ready?
I'm excited.
Let's go. Okay, so far you've been to a sacrament meeting and a fast and testimony.
I know, I feel like I'm going to fill out a bingo card right now.
We've also been in the conference center, taking friends that have visited.
Yeah.
We did something with the Tabernacle Choir, but this is your first time going to General Conference.
Yeah.
What are you expecting?
I am expecting a lot of people. I'm expecting lots of speakers.
Yeah.
I'm expecting to be hungry. Is it pretty open to non-LDS?
It is, but twice a year at General Conference are the two main times they actually hear from their church leadership. So there are so many Latter-day Saints who desire to go that tickets are hard to come by.
Do you think if we get nervous about going, we can scalp our tickets outside?
Maybe. Or selling free tickets.
Yeah, maybe to the street preachers.
So a couple of things that are going to make it different from when I went a couple years ago is when I went last time, the channel had just started. Now the channel is much larger, so I know more people there. I'm going to probably recognize more people. And also, I didn't know anything about Mormonism at that point, so everything was new and unfamiliar to me.
Yeah, I wonder if you'll experience it differently.
I think I might, just because now I've read through the Book of Mormon, I've gone to 4 temples, I've gone to fast and testimony and sacrament meeting a few times, so I kind of know what to expect. So I think I am probably going to process it a little bit differently than when I went 2 years ago. All right, we're here with our friends, Brett and Angie.
Hi.
These are our Latter-day Saint friends who are taking us to conference. We met up with them. Now we're heading downtown. So one thing that is also going to be different from whenever I was here a couple years ago is they had started doing construction on Temple Square, but now it's like fully locked down.
Yeah.
It's going to look nice when it's done, though. One thing I didn't totally talk to you about is our people who come. A lot of Protestants, Evangelicals come, and they pass out tracts, they street preach.
Well, I think we just passed some and they were kind of quiet.
They were quiet, yeah, and the sign said anti-friendly. I'm not sure what that means.
I don't know. Maybe they're not our people.
Maybe those weren't our people.
Is that some right there?
Yeah. Okay, so it's impossible for me not to be just comparing what it was like the last time I was here. It's actually a lot more tame than
Really?
last time. Yeah. The last time I was here, there's a guy like blasting bagpipes. He's evidently a church member, and he just does it to drown out the protesters and some of the street
Are you
preachers.
serious?
Yeah. So like there was.
So wait, he's Latter-day Saint? Or
Yeah.
something? Okay.
And there was there was bagpipes blasting, and there were street preachers kind of talking loud, and there were people handing out tracts. It was like a very intense
Yeah, it
scene.
seemed kind of mild.
This is pretty mild right now. We've only run across a couple. Okay, so we've made our way to the conference center. Lots of people.
In dresses and suits.
Yes, and like I was saying earlier, this is the first time it's been full capacity at conference since 2019. So there's definitely a lot of people here.
Does it feel noticeably different from when you were here?
Yeah, but it looks like things are about to start. You ready to go in?
I'm ready.
Okay, let's go. Okay, we've gone through one session of General Conference. What were your first thoughts, first impressions, first observations sitting in your first session of General Conference?
We've said it several times already, but there are a lot of people here.
Mm-hmm.
The speakers are very well spoken.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like,
good communicators.
excellent communicators. I am really impressed. They start, I don't know, maybe it's just the difference in our tradition. Like when we see pastors come up on stage, they're like, "Oh, hey, how you doing?" Like it's just more
tell
casual.
a couple jokes, yeah.
Yeah, it's way more formal, but I never hear anybody say I'm like super impressed with that. Like, how are they preparing for these talks that they're able to present so well?
Yeah. All right, so you have one session under your belt. Now you're a pro. So we're going to go back in, do the second session, and we'll get our thoughts after that.
Let's go.
Let's go. Okay, we have gone through 4 hours of conference today. You've now gone to 2 sessions. And President Nelson was here for this one.
Yeah.
All right, I'm sure you have more processing to do.
Lots of thinking.
So we're going to think on it. We're going to head home, and we'll share more of our thoughts in just a little bit. Let's go. Okay, we are back. We've had a few days to process. We've talked quite a bit. What were some of your overall thoughts and some of the things that are, even a couple days later, kind of rising to the surface as far as what we experienced and what you'll remember?
I think initially, and I have felt this at different times where we've gone to sacrament meeting or things like that, I feel privileged to be able to experience something that is held really dear to a lot of people that I hold really dear. And I find it fascinating the amount of people that were in attendance and showing up to be there. I found that really interesting.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about why that was so interesting to you?
There's something about being in attendance in a community where I'm the minority, I'm not necessarily a part of it, where it just feels like this is an alternate reality.
Yeah, it's so funny that you're saying it that way, because whenever I first started Hello Saints, it might have been in my very first video. That was my first impression whenever I was deciding to launch this channel, is that there's something about Utah that feels like an alternate reality.
Yeah.
Because we are used to a very evangelical, saturated community, whether it's in the Midwest or the South or in New York. And there's so many similarities that seem familiar. But then once you get into a setting like the conference center, and the songs are a little bit different, the teachings are different, the things that you can tell people value and they're looking forward to seems different. So it's this strange tension of familiar and foreign.
A lot of people here in Utah seem to be very up to date on current trends, fashion trends, and just, there's a lot of influencers here in Utah. And so General Conference very much is representative of, for me, it felt like a different era. It felt like the formalities and some of the expression and the style in which they conducted the conference kind of dates back, it seems, to a different time. Like, I kept thinking about The Sound of Music. I don't know why, it reminded me of that era.
Yeah, it felt very 19th century or early 20th century. And the music, the aesthetic, the general way that things were presented, and it definitely has a feeling that when we're used to a church environment that I know can be kind of off-putting to some Latter-day Saints, where there's almost a leaning into like, how can we be with the times and be as relevant as possible? Which is why the music is always evolving, the teaching styles are always evolving. Now the content stays the same.
Right.
But the way it's presented, even whenever we think about whenever we were kids, church was done in the evangelical church very differently in the 80s and 90s to how it's done now. And so we're kind of used to evolving, whereas the Latter-day Saint worship approach or gathering approach feels almost like a time capsule.
I would think that maybe I could see even more so in Catholicism too. They've preserved, in the same way they've preserved a certain culture as well that feels like a different era.
For sure. So just in general though, whenever we first got there, I know that we communicated some of our thoughts and first impressions as we were sort of walking up on the conference center. What were some of the images, the sounds, the setting that left an impression on you?
I mean, Utah is beautiful. Downtown Salt Lake is beautiful. All the grounds. I hadn't been to that new area around the Tabernacle, I don't think, like the grassy area.
Yeah, so that's just, there's a ton of construction, there has been, but the areas that they've completed are kind of newly accessible, are beautiful. It's just immaculate.
The bathroom is nicer than our home. It's a gorgeous bathroom.
There's a nice bathroom there.
I mean, I like our home too, but the bathroom was incredible. Everything is very well kept and clean and beautiful. I chose to wear a dress for this event, which is the first time I think I've worn a dress to a Latter-day Saint event. Sometimes partially because I feel like I just blend right in, which that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I also am different, and so I don't mind standing apart a little bit. But you don't want
to stick out like a sore thumb,
right? But I definitely noticed that almost everyone had on a very similar dress to what I was wearing, like a long maxi dress, tiered maxi dress with cute little fluttery sleeves, and
you looked great, by the way.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
But I definitely noticed that is the dress code, and the men are wearing suits, and so there's definitely a certain look. Even if you see in some of our footage, if you've never been there, like people are looking very similar.
Yeah, there was a lot of order. Police were keeping certain individuals, which we'll talk about in a second, in certain areas, so they were keeping pedestrian walkways very clear. So it was very organized, even getting these 23,000 plus people into the building.
Yeah, for as many people as were there, and we're kind of all rushing to this building at the same time, it was very calm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we didn't spend a ton of time outside the conference center when we got there because we were running a little bit late, but we did also run into some of our own people. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, honestly, I think I would say I felt really sad. I actually was apologizing to our Latter-day Saint friends that we had attended with as we walked past, I believe, an evangelical, as he was kind of, I don't know that I want to say screaming, but kind of proclaiming very loudly in everyone's direction that we were going to burn in hell. Like, you're going to burn in hell, you're going to burn in hell, you're going to burn in hell. And these people are just like passing by. And so he's saying this to thousands of people. And it just felt, for me personally, felt really harsh.
Well, this is one of the problems I'm having with that form of evangelical proclamation. If people feel they need to be downtown during General Conference because they have a concern for the eternity of Latter-day Saints, okay, that's their prerogative. But the messaging is more about condemnation, about making sure people know they're going to hell and that they're wrong, as opposed to the proclamation of the love of Jesus. And here's the irony of it all. When we walked past the gentleman that you're speaking of, I was walking next to our Latter-day Saint friend, Brett, and he looked at both of us and said, "You gentlemen are going to burn in the lake of fire."
You men are in deep trouble and don't know it. About to ready to go into the lake of fire if you were to die today. You'd go to hell anyway.
And here's the thing about that. He didn't know that I'm a pastor. So here he is casting condemnation in my direction. This is what I believe to be what can be the recklessness of that method. Who he was broad brushing me and condemning me. And where I struggle with that is where Jesus says in John 3:17, "I have not come into the world to condemn it. I've come in the world to save it." So why then is the messaging so harshly to make people understand they're going to hell as opposed to proclaiming the love of Jesus? Because we ran into a couple people that I know who sometimes get mixed up or categorized with that group of people that aren't taking that approach. One individual, his name's Eric Johnson. He is someone who believes that it's important to do ministry to Latter-day Saints, but he was just having very cordial conversation, passing out some books, things of that nature. And then another friend of mine, Bradley Campbell from God Loves Mormons, he was standing there just wanting to have conversation with people. He was very politely saying, "Hey, do you want to have a conversation?" And he wasn't pressuring people. Yeah, and to that point, again, the street preachers who are out there yelling at people are a different group than the people who are out there calmly passing out tracts or talking to people.
Correct.
But for those who are screaming at people, for those who are almost jumping in the path of Latter-day Saints, that's one of the reasons I struggle with it, because they're imposing a certain set of rules of engagement on them that they haven't agreed to. They didn't come to Temple Square or the conference center to get into debates with evangelicals. They came to go into the conference center. Hopefully President Nelson will be there. What am I going to learn? How am I going to be inspired? So to impose into that space and in some way expect a response when they haven't even agreed to the rules of engagement just seems ineffective and not very considerate or loving. All right, so once we got up to the conference center, we got into the conference center, what were your initial impressions? Because I know you've been in there when we've taken friends on tours and things of that nature. It's usually empty. Even when we were there a few months ago singing with the Tabernacle Choir at a rehearsal, it was a very empty building, but this building was packed with people. It was your first time seeing it set up for General Conference. What were some of your impressions there?
I was in awe. When I looked around at the room, it is kind of incredible, not only to see all the people, but it kind of like parallels all the lights that are in the room too. And so it's kind of mesmerizing. Maybe that's the best word. And then the front, everything's very symmetrical and like beautiful. I kept kind of wondering, what does it mean for people to actually be present here? Because I know you can view General Conference online as well. And so for people to actually show up, some travel in to be at General Conference, like what does it mean for them to actually be present?
Yeah. And I think maybe one other reason why that leaves an impression on us is because we're almost, in a sense, playing along. You know, and not in a disingenuous sense, but out of respect for this people group, to dress like they're dressing, to attend in a way, like I said, outside an evangelical mistook me for a Latter-day Saint. I think to almost go into that and identify with them and to fall into their rhythm and to be a part of just the energy in the room is another thing that makes it a really unique experience.
Yeah, I think it compelled me, which this is the point of what we're doing, why we're doing it, but it compelled me to want to understand.
Yeah.
We're playing along and we're coming and we're attending from our experiences, from our tradition, with our beliefs and our faith and just the things that we know. And so to come and attend and see all these people and believe that this is really important to them, like they wouldn't all be showing up, but then be trying to understand, because I mean, you know much more than I do, especially at this General Conference compared to your first one. But all the 70 that are there and the 12, I mean, I hardly know what all of that means, let alone I don't know who these people are. And so I don't necessarily, not that I don't have this like respect for them, but these people are not my leaders. And so they don't carry as much weight in my world as they do to the people here.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that was something that made an impression on me the first time I went to General Conference, the leadership sitting up on the stage. It is a very clear representation, almost a statement of we are a church led by this group of individuals. Now, behind them, seated was the Tabernacle Choir, which we know all about them.
We're pretty much one of them.
Pretty much. So there's so many things about this conference that were different for me in that I knew nothing the first time I went.
Yeah.
And now not only do I know more, but I've experienced more. I've met some of the individuals in leadership. We got to practice with the Tabernacle Choir. So
yeah, there was something sweet for us, especially being new here, to actually have connections with the people that were there.
yes, and that was my favorite part about conference. It was the people that we were not only meeting that we didn't know, but we ran into a ton of friends. Mm-hmm. Whenever I went 2 years ago, I barely even knew the person that took us. And they took us again this year, Brett and Angie Anderson. They're our dear friends.
We love Brett and Angie Anderson.
We love them. They're amazing. And Brett is the one who took me to conference 2 years ago, but I barely knew him.
I remember all of a sudden he called you up to invite you to come.
He was one of my patrons, and he contacted me on Patreon and said, hey, if you want to go to General Conference, I'll help arrange it for you.
And then you kept calling me to tell me where you were in Utah. And you're just like with these random people hanging out. And I'm like, what is happening?
I knew nobody there, let alone the person that was with me. Now this time, we're like BFFs with Brett and Angie. I loved running into friends. Mm-hmm. We ran into people that have taken us on tours or people part of the Tabernacle Choir. We ran into people that I hadn't met, but I'd known about. Mm-hmm. I ran into David Boyce from 52 Churches, who was a former evangelical that was recently baptized into the church. He and I have not met. We've never even talked before. And I was taking a picture with someone and I felt a tap on my shoulder and turned around. And it's like, oh, it's you. I've only seen you on a screen. So that was a cool encounter. I was able to meet someone named Rabbi Joe, who I'd never met before. I met another YouTuber, influencer, magician, like just the
magician?
Yeah,
who was the magician? I didn't meet the magician.
I don't know. He disappeared before I could ask him. No, I'm just kidding. His name was Stuart Edge, and he was super nice.
Is he actually a magician?
He is.
Like a Latter-day Saint magician?
He is a Latter-day Saint magician, and he has a YouTube channel.
So one of the other things that I have come to learn and understand about General Conference is that this is only the second time each year that Latter-day Saints will directly hear from their leadership, and they will give talks. So I learned that the 12 always speak at every conference at some point. And then the 70, they select random few people that also speak. Yeah.
It's definitely one of the things that was confusing for me at first. Whenever people would tell me before the first time I went to General Conference, get ready for like a spiritual feast or a feast of teaching. And I went and I heard all the teachings. And when I came back, I was like, why was that built up so much? Because we are so used to every week going to a church where a pastor or pastors are giving us extensive, deep teachings. Mm-hmm. So that was a light bulb moment for me when I was like, oh, this is one of the few times throughout the year that they're hearing a concentration of teachings about doctrine, about culture and practice, about the vision of the church and what is coming up, like the way forward. So for them, they sort of do wait with bated breath for conference to come around each time. And then they actually talk about these talks in Elders Quorum and Relief Society and Sunday School over the next few months until General Conference comes around again. Mm-hmm. So then it begins to make a little bit more sense. Why were there so many people in that room? Why are there hundreds of thousands of people watching online? Because this is sort of the moment where they can hear from their leaders. So with that, let's talk about some of the talks that we heard and give some of our impressions. We went to the first session on Saturday and the second session on Saturday.
One of the speakers was Emily Bell Freeman, and I was really excited to hear her again, partially because we've met her since we did a video last year where she had spoken at General Conference, and we did a react video to her conference talk. So it was exciting to see her again, and then also to hear her again.
Yeah, and she spoke in the first session. And the first session theme, from what I could gather, and I don't know if they do this intentionally, it's just how I sort of categorize the teachings, but there was a lot of focus on faith, hope, love, and power. Some of these foundational characteristics of faith and of being a follower of Christ. And she spoke pretty directly on a practical level on what it means to have power, to live within the power of the gospel, the power of the atonement. And it kind of echoed the talk given by the person before her, Elder Anderson. And it was a familiar cadence. It was a familiar flow that I found myself observing. And that is initially a lot of conversation about the Bible, about Jesus, about what God has revealed to us through his Son, through the atonement, through the hope of salvation that we have. And I found myself nodding and tracking. But then it would always go to that next level. And that those things are experienced through the covenants that we make, through the promises we keep. That
through the temple.
The power that is experienced in the temple and in the sacrament. So it's just so interesting how those teachings kind of follow that same path that is like a gateway or a trailhead of the hope in Christ and biblical teaching, but then all of those Latter-day Saint characteristics.
Yeah, there were several times I would agree where I was hearing things and I was tracking and I'm like, yes, I believe this. I agree with this. Like, yes, preach about the love of God and how much he loves us. And, I don't know how you are in attendance there, but I do sit with an open heart often. Wherever I am, I try for my heart to be open.
For sure.
And I have a relationship with the Lord. And so I practice paying attention to the Holy Spirit. And so I sat with open ears and with an open heart in listening to these people who believe differently, somewhat differently from me. There are certain things that I'm like, yes. And then there's other things that I'm like, no. Like, this is not fitting what I understand. One of the things that this line I could not get out of my head when she said it, I actually wrote it down. I didn't take enough notes. I should have taken more. But one of the things that Emily Bell Freeman said was, live up to your privilege. I feel like we're really privileged. I feel like we have been given a lot. I feel like there's a responsibility in that. And I do think on a spiritual level, followers of Jesus are heirs to something really profound and beautiful and meaningful. And so for us to connect with and pursue understanding and knowing that privilege and then living up to that privilege, I loved that idea.
Yeah, there was another talk given during a session that we didn't attend, but that I watched by Elder Wilcox, Brad Wilcox. And he talked about a similar thing, and that is that our actions should be a reflection of the faith that we proclaim. Mm-hmm. And my overall takeaway there is that we can get stuck in certain mindsets, that it's all about what we know, or it's all about what we do religiously, or it's all about how we live. And I think Emily Bell Freeman and Brad Wilcox were both hitting on that. We can know all of these things. We can do all of the religious practices, but are we actually living the life that reflects what we say we believe? Mm-hmm. And that was the same sentiment from the newest of the apostles. His name is Elder Kieran. And he gave a talk on probably your favorite topic, joy.
The Church of Joy.
And that's what he kept talking about. Like, if we're going to be this church that does all these religious practices and we hold so many things reverent, I think the most memorable part of his talk was when he physically exemplified what reverence is, and it was kind of something like this. But that isn't necessarily reflective of the joy that members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints should claim to have, that it should be more expressive, more reflecting more happiness. So it's just interesting how there's different teachings taking place, but still driving at this same tension of how we are living and expressing what we claim to believe. So though the content felt different, that tension and trying to harmonize those things is something that we actually strive toward as well in our context.
Yeah, I appreciated the Church of Joy talk too, but it was interesting to hear that talk in that setting where it was very much the reverent, quiet, everyone sitting still, no clapping. To me, I think of joy as being very, expressive and exuberant.
And that's how we express our joy in our worship services.
Right.
People are clapping, they're raising their hands. If they hear something they agree with and during the sermons, they're saying, amen, or like, praise the Lord, hallelujah. So we experience that joy in more expressive ways in our worship settings.
Yeah, I just thought it was an interesting topic, given that actually being there and experiencing that setting, it just feels much more measured than what I would imagine joy could look like.
Yeah. A couple other talks that I thought were really good. There was an individual named Elder Hurst. He was the one with the British accent who was initially warning us that he might faint because that runs in his family. But he talked about the love of God and how that should be practically reflected and lived out. And also President Oakes, he did the final talk in the first session. It was almost a retread or a restatement of President Nelson's talk last year on peacemakers that I thought was really well done. It was almost like, yes, I know I'm almost giving the same talk again. He acknowledged that, but I want to remind everybody that it is our desire that we are peacemakers, that we aren't contentious with people around us who might be different, who might disagree with us, or just believe differently from us.
I would say, and we talked about this a little bit, and this is kind of shifting it from things that we felt like we really enjoyed and we connected to maybe where we felt a little bit of discomfort.
Yes.
There was a lot being presented about God's power and what is required to attain the power that can come through God. And a lot of that was connected. And I mean, I understand this because it makes sense in Latter-day Saint belief that they would be saying this, that it is required to go to the temple, to attend sacrament, to keep your covenants, and to do these things. Maybe wearing garments would be things that are considered like things that you need to do in order to attain God's power. And I think for me, in my heart, and what I've experienced and what I believe and what my relationship with God is like, it felt almost a little bit offensive to what I know. And I know something outside of that to be true. And so I couldn't sit there and agree and feel comfortable with those statements for me, because I know that I don't need to do those things to attain God's power.
Right. I think Emily Bell Freeman was almost testifying that from a Latter-day Saint practice and experience, she feels, and she knows other Latter-day Saints can feel and experience the power of God through Latter-day Saint practice, like going to the temple and going to sacrament meeting. I don't think that bothered us, just because regardless of the faith context you come from, you're there because you experience something based on how you practice and worship and some of those things. It was Elder Renlund's talk that I think you're speaking of that I felt, and we actually talked to a couple of our evangelical friends who were there, who attended that same morning. One of them is a pastor that I do a lot of ministry with. It did come across a bit offensive, or at the very least dismissive, when it came to the presentation of the gospel and the church need to go together almost like highly unstable explosive substances. He was using dynamite as an example, that it requires a very unstable substance, I think nitroglycerin, which he equated to the gospel. And it also requires sort of this benign, stable, porous substance that when you put it together is what makes dynamite more powerful, more stable, and more valuable. And he said that the gospel is like the nitroglycerin, and that the earthen substance is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And he said quite clearly that it is that combination that is necessary to experience the power of God. And he also flat out said that the gospel without the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is unstable and unpredictable. And even took a shot, so it felt, at non-Latter-day Saint churches, that this is why there are so many different views and why there's so much unpredictable paths that other churches take. And that felt very head-scratching for me, because so many Latter-day Saints have been telling me, we're so similar, we're the same, we all desire the same things, we're all saved by Jesus. And yet he was almost stating that the power of God is exclusive to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That's how you took it. That's how I took it. That's how some of our other evangelical friends took it.
And I think it's hard for us, to put it plainly, it's hard for us to reconcile that statement that's being made as truth within the church when we know something different and we have experienced the power of God and we can give testimony to God's power.
100%. That's perfectly said. It's one thing to, in a theoretical sense, say, this is what we hold to be important for us to experience the power of God. It's another thing to say, it is only experienced because of this combination, and anyone outside of that is not going to experience power of God. Maybe another way that I can put it is, it's one thing to proclaim a truth that you theoretically experience. It's another thing when you can empirically observe that God's power is manifest outside of that paradigm that's being presented. And that's where I felt a lot of, to be honest, disconnect and dissonance. Because to your point, we have witnessed and we have experienced the unexplainable power of God in our lives and the lives of the people around us through ministry. We're not just doing ministry because we strongly believe in the Bible and we like to preach it. It's because we have a very dynamic relational experience with God. There's an incarnational experience of his power in our lives through our testimonies, through seeing people healed, released from addiction, marriages being restored. In certain parts of ministry, people experiencing unexplainable miracles. So to in some way say that the only way to have access to God's power is through this combination is something that we would empirically be able to observe and testify that we don't believe that that's true. In fact, I think I have the opposite view that he presented. It's not that the gospel is unstable and the church is needed to stabilize it. It's that the church, and many churches filled with men and humans, have a tendency to be unstable. And it is the gospel that is the stabilizing force that the church needs. So that gets a little bit tricky because I don't think offense is meant, but it does come across dismissive and in some ways degrades what those outside of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints can clearly testify about the power of God.
I think the thing that is neat about the power of God is that it can't be limited and it can cross all walls and all boundaries and all beliefs and all doctrines to meet people where they are. And that is the power of God. And to me, a temple isn't required for that. A temple can be a place that God shows up, but it's not required for him to do so.
Right. Yes. I mean, you're pretty much quoting a passage out of Acts 17 when Paul is at the Areopagus and he's speaking on Mars Hill. I mean, he flat out says that the Lord no longer needs temples built by human hands, but desires to dwell in and amongst his people. And that is in the book of Acts when the power of God was manifested in some incredible ways. So yeah, that's one of those talks that, some of them we can say we can eat the meat and throw away the bones here when it comes to what's being proclaimed. But that one almost fully felt like it was, though honest, I think inconsistent to some of the messaging I hear from other Latter-day Saints and not consistent with what we experience as we are following Jesus and seeing his power in our lives.
Kind of to go along with that, I think that it's true and it's possible, whether it's in the Latter-day Saint Church, whether it's in the Evangelical Church, whether it's in the Catholic Church, that there can be a limitation of God's love and God's power when it is confined to doctrine, to formalities, to religiosity.
Yeah, because in our context, I mean, we're not saying religion is bad or religiosity is bad or that religious practice is bad. It's that when it comes to experiencing the power of God, in our context, we don't feel that a religious structure is the only place where God's power is experienced, felt, or manifested. And to insinuate that those who don't practice the exact way Latter-day Saints practice are void or being held back from God's power just isn't consistent with our experience. So last but not least, let's talk about what was your favorite thing about what you experienced at conference. I know what mine was.
You go first, because I don't know what mine
I think it's going to be the same as yours.
Really?
Yes.
The children's choir?
The children's choir.
Really?
Yes.
That one song, that one moment in the middle of that song.
Yes. That one song, 30 minutes into the second session, the Northern Utah Children's Choir sang, I believe it's a Latter-day Saint primary song called Gethsemane, and I was absolutely crying a little bit.
Tell me about that. I didn't notice you were crying. It was very moving, but what about it brought you to tears?
I think it was just the beautiful juxtaposition about these young, small, innocent voices proclaiming the sufferings of Jesus, because that's really what it was about. Proclaiming what he was willing to go through and the excruciating path that he was on because of his love for mankind. To hear that in children's voices, proclaiming that, it just got me.
Feels like a little piece of heaven. They were like little angels up there.
Yeah.
And that really is what heaven will be like.
Yeah.
The sound of all of our voices singing praise to him.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, that was a beautiful moment.
One other thing that I was remembering I was going to mention, sitting in this room with all these precious people, I do expect heaven and one day meeting Jesus to consist of crowds of people all gathering for one purpose, to praise and honor God. So even though I don't necessarily share the same beliefs, and I can't say I personally feel compelled now after having gone to General Conference. I don't feel compelled. I don't feel the need to join the church. There is something special about connecting, and something that I can resonate with, where I'm connecting with other people who are seeking God and seeking to know God.
Yeah, and I think that is kind of the most important thing. Whenever I went to conference 2 years ago, I heard a little bit more about Joseph Smith. I heard a little bit more about certain beliefs in Doctrine and Covenants. This time, it felt a lot more focused on Jesus, even more so than last time. It also seemed a little bit more focused on Book of Mormon and Bible than even more Doctrine and Covenant belief system. I'm not saying that stuff is being jettisoned, downplayed, or anything like that, but I can't connect with a lot of the teachings and practices of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I don't believe a lot of the practices and a lot of the claims about Joseph Smith to be compatible with what the Bible teaches. But where you have a group of people who are desiring to see Jesus clearly and leaning in to receive teaching so that the Savior can be seen, that's where it does feel like an honor to be a part of something important at a conference like that, even though we're not part of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So we want to say a special thanks to everybody who helped make this whole experience possible. Thank you to our dear friends Brett and Angie Anderson for getting us tickets, running around with us all day, holding our gear, and just being sweet and awesome. We love you guys. And to all the other people who helped make it possible throughout the day. The Wells, you know who you are. Thank you for everything that you did for us. And for all the people that we met and for all the people that we were introduced to for the first time. It was great to have the guest pass for the day. It was an honor for us to spend a day at General Conference with our Latter-day Saint friends. And leave a comment below about your favorite moment in conference, if you watched it online or if you were there. And we'd love to just hear what stuck out to you and get some conversations going down in the comment section. So thank you for going to conference with me.
Yeah, thank you. Are we going to do a react video to one of the other General Conference talks we missed?
We might. I think we could.
Okay.
So like this video, you can subscribe, support us on Patreon if you'd like. Otherwise, just keep coming back for more videos. So until next time, we'll see you later, Saints.